perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live, this is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me on Point of View. We're going to spend a little bit of time here talking about what's on television. And you know, whenever any of us complain about what is shown on television, we oftentimes hear this cliche, well, if you don't like it, just change the channel. And if you've been receiving my commentaries, you know recently I did a commentary based on some things that Melissa Henson of Parents Television Council wrote about. That particular case we were talking about is a mother watching Good Morning America, and all of a sudden, while they're eating their oatmeal and watching television, you have a soft porn ad for a program called Betrayal. We have an even worse one now, if that's possible, and that has to do with what followed the Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown program. And we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about that, and then also maybe point you to a list for your holiday shopping season of some of the best and worst TV advertisers. This comes from our good friends at the Parents Television Council, which is a nonpartisan education organization advocating responsible entertainment, founded back in 1995. And the head of it is Tim Winter, who has more than 20 years in broadcast, cable, and internet, as well as new media technologies, along with his law degree. He's an individual that has worked with the National Broadcasting Company for many years, serving in numerous management capabilities and capacities for that media conglomerate, both in Los Angeles, New York, and Europe. And Tim, I thank you so very much for joining us today here on Point of View.
Kerby, good day to you from Los Angeles. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Always good to hear from you and some of your staff. As you can tell, I've quoted some of the other commentaries that have come out, but this latest one, I wanted to maybe go into in a little more detail. We have some articles. We have your press release, as well as an article that appeared in a newspaper that will give people a little bit of a sense of what is actually taking place. But set us up, because here on a Thursday night on ABC, families gather around the television set to watch kind of a perennial favorite. That is, it's the Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown. But the segue wasn't so good, was it?
No, it was not so good. And this is a program, I don't know about you, but I'm in my mid-50s, and I remember every Halloween looking forward to watching the Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown. Sure. It was it's such a fun, wonderful, heartwarming story, and it's wonderful that even today it still is one of the top-ranked shows every during Halloween week on broadcast television. So you have millions of children, millions of families watching the Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown, and this year ABC chose to program a show immediately after the Charlie Brown special called Scandal. And Scandal, you'd think, well, by the name of it, it's going to be scandalous. There's going to be some edgy material in it. And what happened this year, just as the Charlie Brown special ended, literally 26 seconds.
Wow.
26 seconds after the show ended, you were taken into an explicit graphic sex scene. And that was at 8 Central. So half the country was at 8 p.m., but the entire thing was less than a minute removed from the Charlie Brown special. If you were a parent, and if you had your only hope really was to have the remote in your hand, the remote control in your hand, your thumb on the channel changer, aimed at the TV, you had no chance otherwise to protect your children from really explicit sexual conduct.
Well, it's just incredible. We have posted, of course, the article that was in the Washington Post, and they have a link if you want to watch the video to see that we're not making this up. And you have a scene where Sally storms off the screen, and like you said, then within seconds you have And I'm not even sure I want to describe this sex scene on television because it's kind of this fantasy. And as we have pointed out in the past, I, of course, mentioned the fact that I'd done a piece that Melissa Henson did a while back, because you have a situation where, in the case of her story, it's watching Good Morning America, trying to maybe catch up on the news, maybe find out about traffic or weather, and all of a sudden, boom, you're hit with betrayal. Here, you're sitting down with your family watching The Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, and boom, you're hitting once again with the segue that is from Scandal. And I think these broadcasters, you work for NBC, so I know you know this, and I know they know this, that trying to lead people from one program to another is really important, and what your segue is going to be key in trying to keep in an audience. But a segue from a children's program to a steamy sex scene, that one is really beyond the pale, isn't it?
It really is, and boy, you just hit the nail right on the head. When it comes to the television broadcasters, when it comes to the television industry, there's something called audience flow, audience retention, and it's a strategic move by the networks to get you to go from one show to the next without changing the channel. And they used to have a commercial break in between shows. Now, frequently, they don't even have a commercial break. They'll run the commercial break a little bit earlier, but the idea is, they'll give you just one more little bit of your show just as it's ending, and they take you seamlessly right into the next show. And what was interesting here, and we didn't even realize this at the outset, but we got some calls and some emails from our members around the country. If you had just set your DVR, your recording device, to record just the Charlie Brown special, that program actually ended about 1 minute early.
Yes, 8:59. Yes,
8:59.
I saw that.
So you even if you were just recording that one show, they say, "Well, change the channel." It still would have recorded because it came in before the 9 o'clock tick actually happened. So it really is the height of I think it's so arrogant of ABC, first of all, to program this way. Second of all, we've asked them to apologize and pledge not to do it again. They have not done so. They have said nothing publicly. They refuse to do so. And even the producer of the show herself, Shonda Rhimes, has joked about, "Hey, kitty, hide the kitty's eyes," or something like that on Twitter.
Saw some of that.
So that to me shows, it's not entirely accidental. Maybe it was negligent, but I think there's something more to it. I think they realized what they were doing, and that really is unfortunate. What you said a minute ago about the boom, it's a sucker punch, and sadly, parents in America today have to be so defensive with their entertainment media choices, and this is something that they couldn't have even blocked if they had tried to.
Well, let's, if we can, just before we go to a break, encourage you to find some of the information. I'm going to really encourage our listeners to take some action. And first of all, of course, as I mentioned, we have that Washington Post article, and at the end it has that Twitter post, that tweet from the creator, Shonda Rhimes, who thought, isn't this kind of funny? And so that will give you some ammunition. We have the press release from Parents Television Council. Of course, we have a link to parentstv.org. Really encourage you to think about whether or not you might want to express your opinion about this. And when we come back, we'll continue talking about some of the action items that you might want to follow up on, but might also encourage you to go to parentstv.org, because they have sort of a naughty and nice list. This one is looking at what are the advertisers that actually sponsor good television programs, what advertisers actually advertise and promote in their sense, their dollars, those programs that we have some questions about. And so, again, you're a consumer, and you can certainly decide which programs you might want to watch and which advertisers you might want to support and which advertisers you might want to write to. So we're giving you a fair amount of ammunition. So let's take a break. We come back, we'll continue our conversation with Tim Winter. They have a place at, of course, the Parents Television Council to even sign up for their e-alerts, and that's how I find out about a lot of these things. I'd encourage you to do the same, and it's all available at our website, pointofview.net. Let's come back and talk a little bit more about television. Of course, if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. We'll be right back.
The Point of View Commentary with Kerby Anderson.
Earlier this month, Brittany Maynard ended her life. She had become the public face of the euthanasia movement when she moved to Oregon so that she could end her life using Oregon's Death with Dignity Act. Before doing so, she engaged in a video campaign with the group Compassion and Choices. The debate over euthanasia and physician-assisted suicide has been taking place for decades, but her publicized choice about ending her life once again brings the debate into the public arena. Wesley J. Smith says that Compassion and Choices wants to exploit her assisted suicide as a crowbar to pry open California and other states to legalizing doctor-prescribed death. Already 3 countries and 5 states have some form of physician-assisted suicide. We can see the extreme in the Netherlands. In my book, Christian Ethics in Plain Language, I document the number of people who have been put to death without their consent. Doctors in that country are even allowed to decide if a child with a disability should live. What about the term death with dignity? In her column in the San Francisco Chronicle, Deborah Saunders asks a good question. If Maynard died with dignity, then does that mean that others who do not choose to choreograph their death lack dignity? She explains that the language that has been chosen by pro-euthanasia advocates, death with dignity, suggests that there is something undignified about holding on to life. What will be the impact on the disabled? Well, Johnny Erickson Tata believes that assisted suicide poses a significant danger to people with disabilities. She says, who is to say when multiple sclerosis or ALS is classified as terminal? People who receive a diagnosis of a chronic disabling condition often experience suicidal feelings, but later adapt very well. You know, death with dignity may sound compassionate, but the reality of the slogan should concern everyone. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Talking with Tim Winter for a few more minutes, president of Parents Television Council. You can go to parentstv.org. And you know, this idea of just change the channel sort of has morphed into the idea of throw out your television sets because you just don't know what's coming through the TV set. And Tim, that's why I'm finding a fair number of my listeners are saying, you know, I'm not sure I even want to turn the TV on anymore because I can't trust what the production companies, what the networks are providing. And yet, just a few decades ago, there used to sort of be an unwritten contract between the parents and the producers that we will produce, at least during the so-called family hour, things that would be upholding, that are not going to violate the innocence of your children. But that sort of unwritten contract has gone bye-bye a long time ago, hasn't it?
It really has. It's been probably 25 or 30 years, I think, since the networks really took that family hour qualifier seriously. It's gotten only worse. And you talk to the broadcasters, they say, "Hey, we have to compete against the cable networks for viewers." The cable networks say, "Hey, we have to compete against HBO and Cinemax and Showtime for the viewers." And what you have is, basically a family hour run amok.
Yeah.
It's just terrible, and you're exactly right. And it's so sad that we can't even use the publicly owned airwaves that we own to entertain our children, our families, even at the earliest times of prime time.
So grateful for the Parents Television Council. Let's give some of you a chance to join our conversation today. 1-800-351-1212. We'll go to Georgia first. Antoine, thank you for joining us today. You're on with Tim Winter.
Yes, how you doing?
Very good. What would you like to share?
Yes, I was just telling a friend that the other day. It's like, you know, when you think about HBO and Showtime and Stars, you know, when they have these sex scenes, and you expect when you're watching ABC or any other, you know, local station, you don't expect to get those sex scenes, but we in different times now, so you see a lot of sex scenes on these sitcoms now. ABC, man, they so blatant now. So it's like when I'm kind of cautious of what kind of sitcoms I watch, because my daughters, my oldest daughter, she's 11, and my youngest daughter is 10. So I don't want them to see all these sex scenes that's on these sitcoms now. So when they come on, I try to hurry up and turn the station.
Very good. And, Tim, as you were pointing out, you might be very active and involved, but as you said, in this case with the Charlie Brown Great Pumpkin story, you had less than 26 seconds, which means you almost have, as you said, the remote control in your hand, your thumb on the button, and aim directly at the screen. And if any of one of those three things weren't happening, you're just out of luck. And that scene then gets pumped into your home.
Yeah, I really appreciate the comments there from Antoine. And I have a daughter. I have a teenage daughter. And, he's so right about, you would expect some of this content on certain networks. You wouldn't expect it on ABC and at that time of the day. And one more thing that the TV networks tell us, where they try to put the blame back on parents, they say, well, we provide the parents with the tools. The tools are the content ratings. When you turn on the show and it says in the corner, TV PG or TV 14, what the public doesn't realize is that the TV networks decide themselves what the rating is going to be.
Right.
They choose for themselves. And what they have rated is every single show on broadcast TV is TV 14, which tells parents all of this stuff is appropriate for a 14-year-old child. I will tell you that is absolutely not the case. How could these sex scenes that we're talking about be appropriate for a 14-year-old child? But that's what the TV network says, and they say we have no responsibility. It's all the parents' fault because they're not doing their job. We're giving them the tools. The tools are, to me, fraudulent. And parents like Antoine and like me and like so many of your listeners, how can we possibly be expected to protect our children when we're told that this is appropriate for children in the content rating?
We have quite a lot of activists that listen to this program, and I thought we might give them some opportunities to express their opinion. First, let's talk about things like the situation in which the scandal scene shows up after Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown, or the promotion for betrayal shows up on Good Morning America. Is there something our listeners can do about that?
Yes, the worst thing they could possibly do is say nothing. But silence means acclamation when you're our opponents. When you are at the TV network level, when you hear nothing, it suggests to them that everything's okay. So you have to pick up the phone, call your local TV station that aired it. Make sure you know who the sponsors are of each show. It's the sponsors who actually pay the TV networks for your attention so they can sell their product to you. So the sponsors are the ones writing the checks. Make sure you know who the sponsors are of all these different programs.
We're going to give that list out in just a minute, but let's, if we can, maybe take some more phone calls. 1-800-351-1212. We'll go to Florida next. WJLU. And Michelle, thank you for calling today. What would you like to share with us?
Hello. Just again, in keeping with your discussion there, I'm thinking about when we're trying to watch some football on Sunday. The commercials there, I mean, I have to have the TV set for flipping over to another station because it's just pretty routine. And I'm thinking about, personally me, I'm watching ESPN. This is going back a couple months when they had that gay football player. And seriously, I was watching ESPN and it showed those two men kiss, and I was like floored. And then I heard the fallout of that later when anybody criticized that or said that they were so offended, they needed counseling or something. And it's just like, it's just sad. It's sad.
Yeah, you're just seeing things that you weren't expecting to see. And there's a good example of a football game. I know of one company that was working so that when a commercial comes on in a football game or a sports event, it flips to a, quote, safe channel and then flips back again after the commercials, because a lot of people have said, I love to watch football, I love to watch tennis, I love to watch basketball, I love to see what's happening in the sports world, but some of those commercials can turn you into a pillar of salt.
Yeah, I think, when we look at the number of complaints and comments and feedback we get from our members around the country, Same theme, the sucker punch that comes in through either a TV commercial or even more frequently than the commercials are the network promotions. You can be watching a family-friendly show at 8 p.m. and they'll do the, coming up at 10, here comes this show. And they'll do a promotion of it, and it is usually the most explicit scene of the show that they put in the promotion as an enticement for you to watch. And no matter how diligent a parent can possibly be, how do you protect yourself from that kind of a sucker punch? It's, again, more irresponsibility on the part of the broadcaster. We also get a lot of concerns about the, I'll just refer to it as the little blue pill commercials.
Yes.
During football games and so forth. We actually work with the pharmaceutical companies that produce those products. They give us their ad buys a week ahead of time, and on our website, parentstv.org, you can find out when those commercials are going to air, so you can be aware that they're coming.
Well, let me, just before I let you go, and we'll continue taking some phone calls in the next segment, talk about the fact that you have put together a very good list, the best and worst advertisers list. And for example, you find that when it comes to fast food restaurants, the best are things like Papa John's, worst things like Burger King. When you talk about clothing, some of the best are like TJ Maxx and Marshalls and things of that nature. Some of the worst, the Gap and Old Navy. So you can go through this list of all sorts of different things, grocery, computer hardware, financial services, and all the rest, and see who tend to sponsor the good programs and who tend to sponsor the bad programs. And that's available on your website, isn't it?
It is indeed. It is indeed. And this, again, goes directly to those who sponsor, those who underwrite the best and worst programs on television with their media dollars. We want to make sure that the public knows who those companies are and they can vote with their wallets.
Let me encourage you to go to their website, which is an outstanding website. If you haven't been to it before, we have a link to parentstv.org. And I think as a good action item, I might encourage you to pick out one or two of the best. It's nice to also tell people when you think they're doing a good job that maybe you already go to, and then maybe send a letter or email or something to one or two of the worst that maybe you say, I'm offended that you made the bad list and tend to sponsor and advertise on programs that are not family friendly. And I think there's some very good action items that you can take. So, Tim, I appreciate the good work that you've been doing all these years there at Parents Television Council, and I thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Kirby, thank you for spreading the word of our work, and we're so grateful for that voice. We can't sit back and do nothing. We have to be active about this.
ParentsTV.org, and Tim Winter has been with us. We have his picture there. You can click on that. We have the website. We also, under our website here, have both the press release as well as the article that appeared in the Washington Post on that. So we've given you quite a bit of information and ammunition. But let's take a break. When we come back, I can see that we've got quite a bank of phone calls wanting to address this issue of media and television. Stay on the line. We'll give you that opportunity to express your opinion. And if you'd like to join us, that number is 1-800-351-1212. Let's take a break, and we will come back and take your phone calls. But feel free to visit our website, pointofview.net. We've given you lots of information. Now it's your responsibility to take that information and do something with it. Let's take a break. We'll be back with your phone calls right after this.
If you've been a Christian for any length of time, no doubt you've heard about Jesus feeding thousands with a few loaves of bread and a couple of fish. Jesus took something small and turned it into something big. Recently, someone here at Point of View made an interesting discovery. He did some math and figured out that according to the number of faithful listeners we have, if you and every other listener gave $5, it would help Kerby and the team bring you interviews and commentary for not 3 months, but 3 years. You heard me right. If every listener donates just $5, we'd pay what it costs to bring you this needed information for 3 years. And if you urge a friend to join you, you send 5, they send 5, well, you can imagine the impact. Click the Donate Now button at pointofview.net. Pointofview.net. Or send $5 to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Box 30, Dallas 75221. Send $5. Urge a friend to join you. Support Point of View. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
And continue our conversation today about television. We'll continue this for the hour, and then in the second hour, we're going to be joined by Jimmy DeYoung as we talk about what's happening in Israel. A lot to talk about there, but I think we can kind of see in this first half hour here the futility and the unreasonableness of this idea that, well, if you don't like it, just change the channel. We've already given you some examples of how that simply does not work. I mentioned my commentary that aired earlier this month about a woman, a mother complaining about the fact that here she's watching Good Morning America while she's trying to pack lunches and get kids ready to go out the door. While they're eating their oatmeal, up comes a soft porn ad for a program called Betrayal. Then we've just talked with Tim Winter about the most recent one, and we've posted lots of information about that. Not only their press release, but an article that appeared in the Washington Post. By the way, when the Washington Post starts saying this is a problem, you know it's a problem. And in this particular case, family sits down to watch It's the Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown, and as the last scene ends and Sally storms off, it segs immediately into scandal with a steamy sex scene, and I can't really on radio even begin to tell you all that it involved. But let's say that it involved lots of skin and more than two people. So you can let your imagination run and feel how inappropriate that was right after a children's program. So what are your thoughts? I'd love to get some comments from each of you. So let's open up the phones again. 1-800-351-1212. We'll go to Georgia. Denise, thank you for calling today. What would you like to share?
Well, first of all, Kerby, I'd like to say thank you and God bless you.
Well, thank you.
For providing us this forum to air our grievances. I haven't watched national TV in years. There's nothing but trash. I don't even watch cable network. I watch shows. Duck Dynasty, 19 Kids and Counting, and the Hallmark Channel.
Oh, sound pretty good.
I found that those are the only three areas on the whole thing that I can sit down with a grandchild and watch and know that they're going to come out with some kind of godly principle.
Yeah, and of course I do appreciate Fox Channel because, I like Mike Huckabee and I like some of the programs there, but I understand what you're saying. I sometimes watch the sports, but like you, there's a lot of stuff to avoid, and some, as we're going to see from one of our callers in a minute, just said, they decided to just pull the plug on cable. But again, express what you think we should do, because I do think there's some marching orders for individuals, and that is you can let some of these advertisers that continuously sponsor these programs like H&R Block and Microsoft and Red Bull and the Gap and Old Navy, they need to hear from us and say, you're putting your advertising dollars in programs we don't like. And
I completely agree. And I thank you for giving us that website to go to, because, my husband laughs at me all the time. He says, by the time you get through protesting, we're going to have to grow everything.
No, there's some really good ones out there. Matter of fact, I would have to say that it's a big chart, so I could go through all of this, but it would wear you out. There are probably as many positives, even more positives than there are negatives. So that's good. Let's tell the Hewlett Packards and the Walmarts and the Tropicanas and Pepsis and Marshalls and Dunkin' Donuts and Papa John's and things like that are sponsoring good programs. A lot of them, by the way, are sponsoring things like Duck Dynasty or whatever. Let's keep it up. So I hope that you'll write not only a negative letter but a positive letter or more, so that you can let people know what you're thinking.
Well, we got A&E to get Phil Robertson back on there.
Well, just keep working. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, I appreciate you calling in, Denise. Call again, okay?
God bless you.
Let's move from Denise in Georgia. We have another Denise in South Carolina, WAGP. And Denise, I think, aren't you the one that wanted to pull the plug on cable? Tell us more. Well, put Denise on hold there. Maybe she's out for a moment. We'll go to Darius in South Carolina. What would you like to share?
Can you hear me?
I certainly can.
Okay, I was calling concerning the Hardee's commercial.
Oh, those are always terrible, aren't they?
Aren't they? I don't even have any small children at home, but I don't want to see, the sexy, sultry woman sitting there slowly eating whatever she's eating and, the intentions that are meant to be portrayed by all this. I don't frequent Hardee's because of these commercials, because I just don't think that that's someplace that I would want to be associated with because of the commercials.
Sure. I've never seen one of them, but I've heard about them through groups like the Parents Television Council and American Family Association. And when I've watched even a clip or some of the still photos of it, I'm going, really? You think that's how you're going to sell food? Really?
And like you say,
they're on the bad list, as you might gather.
Food.
Go ahead.
It's just selling sex, and that's all there is to it.
Yeah, it's just, you do have to wonder about the mindset of individuals sitting in an ad agency coming up with these kinds of ideas and saying, okay, we want families to come to these restaurants. We want to have maybe family values expressed, and this is going to appeal maybe to some overactive teenage boys, but probably nobody else.
Exactly.
And I mean, just it makes no sense from a programming point of view, but They're welcome to come up with whatever they want, and we're welcome to decide whether we want to walk into that restaurant or actually purchase something that's advertised on that particular program, right?
I agree. And, the places that you can go into and you can hear Christian music playing in the background, that's the type of places I want to go to.
Well, it sounds a little bit like what Mardell's and Hobby Lobby and places like that, right?
Cookout is a local place that does that.
Don't know that one.
I don't know how many states or places it's in, but it's a very good restaurant. You can smell the, smokehouse type, cooking outside type flavor from the burgers before you ever get inside. And you can hear the Christian music playing and just gives a good family atmosphere. And I would much rather go there and have better food and a better atmosphere than go to some place that advertises porn like that.
Very good. I appreciate your phone call. Let's give a few more of you a chance to join our conversation today. We'll stay in South Carolina. This time we'll go to WKCL. Letitia, thank you for calling today.
Hello, thank you. I really appreciate about it and almost make a great deal of it because it's important, and if we don't kind of fight back in some kind of way, it's going to overcome us. One thing that really bothers me is that the worst commercial goes out in between the football game.
Yes.
But everybody watches football game. And I always tell my husband, it's constant fight in my house to try to get, people to understand, because people become desensitized. They sit there and they watch it so long till they become desensitized to it. And after a while, they don't really recognize that what's happening.
Sure. Let me talk about that for just a minute, because we're going to come to a break and we'll take some more phone calls. I was aware of and am aware of a company that's out of Boston that is rolling this program out. And they first focused on sports because they recognize so many people watch sports, but almost everybody, not everybody, but almost everybody that watches sports complains about the commercials. And the technology is relatively simple. I had never thought about that, because when a commercial comes on, it sends another signal digitally, and they can pick up that signal and then actually have a little box that you can put on your television that would then switch you to a safe channel during the commercial and then switch you back. One of the reasons people don't switch out the commercials during a football game is that they're afraid that as soon as the timeout's over, they'll miss some action on the TV. And so they have come up with an idea. The reason they were talking to me is that then they came up with the idea of not only switching people off of that program for a moment, off the commercial, but then you could switch them to something that would be even uplifting, a message from Max Lucado, Jim Dobson, or in this case, Kerby Anderson, that would actually come during the commercial, then you come back again. And they just thought that might be an encouragement. And so the idea is eventually they would want to have this for all programs, so that any time a commercial came on, it would switch you either to a safe channel or to some kind of teaching or short little advertisement or a commentary or devotional or something like that. Of course, that the advertiser is going to have a fit about that. But nevertheless, that was because of, Letitia, the comment you've made. And that is, so many people, perhaps more than any other television segment, almost to a person, and there are some exceptions, of course, but most of them complain about the commercials during the football games and during the various sporting events. So when I know more about that technology, and if it's beginning to roll out, I think they were rolling it out in Boston. They came to Texas because they thought that would be a big market, and then they wanted to roll it out to the rest of the country. Once that becomes available, we might make that interview available to you just so you are aware of it. It's one more way of making sure that you can guard what comes into your home. So I appreciate you bringing up that question. And we do have to take a break, so when we come back, we'll take some more phone calls. Don't forget, in our second hour today, Jimmy DeYoung will be with us as we talk about Israel. But we still have a pretty good bank of phone calls. We'll take some more calls on television and whether it makes any sense to change the channel when you don't know what's coming. We'll be right back.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
If you'd like to join a conversation, 1-800-351-1212. We'll try to slip in a call or two just before we wind down this hour, and we'll go to South Carolina. Dennis, thank you for calling today.
Hello. This is an issue that's been very big on my mind for over 20 years. And my wife, 20 years ago, was serving breakfast to my children in front of TV on a Saturday morning watching cartoons, and a very sexualized used car commercial came on.
There we go.
And that irritated her. And then when she went to pick up their trays, the little breakfast trays, another commercial, same used car commercial, another very sexualized commercial came on. And she just simply said, "That's it. I'm not going to expose my children to this." And she pulled the plug in the cable. It was 20 years ago, and it's not been plugged in since.
Good for you.
And what we found out is our children are different than other children. They have a different pace. They don't mind things being. They love I Love Lucy programs. They can watch Roy Rogers, and they can watch Bing Crosby and those Road to Rio movies. They don't have to have this rapid fire action every minute programming to stay involved in the program. They're just much calmer. The important thing, I think, is that we don't have to watch TV.
Nope.
You don't have to create a revolution where the advertisers are going to be forced to stop advertising on bad TV, and bad TV is going to go away. That's not going to happen as far as I believe. I don't think that's going to happen. But if people decided to not watch the stuff in the first place, I mean, you're not going to take your kid to a restaurant where they might possibly have eat something that's going to make them sick.
Right.
You're just going to avoid that place. You're not going to take them to a beach where they may get bitten by a shark.
And another point I might put out is, when we had Tim Winter on, we didn't talk about this, but he has been a strong advocate for cable choice, and that is the idea that you could buy cable a la carte. In other words, when you get cable, you get everything, and a lot of it you don't want, and you really wish it wasn't even coming in your home. But some of those cable channels, as you just pointed out, you can point out Nickelodeon, you can talk about various film channels, so that you could get the I Love Lucy's or the various older movies and things of that nature. But right now, the way a lot of cable companies get this bad stuff in our homes is they actually bundle bad cable channels with good cable channels, and then you have to be much more picky. Of course, the one I was talking about here is the issue with ABC. That is coming into your home whether you have cable or not, and in many cases they just simply blindside you. So I've got there are a whole lot of answers to this question, but certainly, Dennis, one of the simple answers is what your family did 20 years ago, and that is decide to no longer have that stuff poured into your home. So I appreciate the decision that you made, and it may be one that some of our listeners would want to follow. Let me jump to Caroline in Arizona. I think you want to talk about satellite channels, so there's another aspect of what Dennis was talking about. So tell us what you've done.
Right. I've just taken all TVs and unplugged them completely, because one of the things, like you mentioned, the ABC channel, if I'm a Christian, I'm not walking as a Christian, and I really checked out my heart. And I justified watching some of those programs that are really almost on a porno kind of sensitivity
almost
anymore.
Like soft porn anymore, yeah.
Right, and it's very costly on a monthly basis. And the commercials, I mean, if you see really any programming, I think it's up to about 8 minutes every time a program breaks.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Is
That's
commercial time.
Yeah, about 22 minutes of content and about 8 minutes of commercials. So you think you're getting a lot more program than you're getting any half hour. Go ahead.
Absolutely. And I figured God sees all. And so I'm really just hurting myself in the long run. And I'm hurting Jesus Christ. and I'm a woman now by myself. So I just either buy TG DVDs or I read lots of books.
Well, and again, there's a lot to be said about disconnecting from television. One of the things I've always said about the fact that I like speaking at Christian conferences and camps and things like that is that oftentimes when we go off to one of these camps, and I do these at Pine Cove or Gull Lake or Mount Herman or Camp of the Woods or all sorts of ones, is they disconnect from the digital world. And I think that is really good. And sometimes children realize there's a lot more to life than sitting in front of a screen, whether it's a TV screen, a video screen, a computer screen. And so those are some very positive aspects of that. But just before we run out of time, I wanted real quickly for anybody that maybe joined us late, to just give you some possible action items. And one of those is that if you express our concern and agree with our expressed concern about the fact that just recently after It's the Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown, they in less than 30 seconds segued right into a steamy sex scene in Scandal. Seems to me that a letter to ABC expressing your outrage is appropriate. And we have both the press release and the article that appeared in the Washington Post on our website. So it's very easy for you if you wanted to express your opinion about that particular incident. Or the other action item is if you wanted to go to Parents Television Council. They have now put forward just a few days ago, so this is just as new as actually 2 days ago. Interesting how fast this has come out. The list of best and worst TV advertisers. And so they look at various categories like fast food restaurants, beverages, clothing and retail, general retail, personal items, grocery, computer hardware and software, and financial services and software. And they have both the best and the worst. And so I think that it would be good to certainly express your concern to some of the worst, and then maybe also send maybe an attaboy to one of the best or more. And again, as I mentioned before, you can look at fast food restaurants, and Baskin Robbins and Dunkin' Donuts and Papa John's have continuously sponsored really good family-friendly programs. On the other hand, Burger King and Taco Bell and some of them haven't. You can talk about beverages like Pepsi or Tropicana have always sponsored very good programs. Red Bull, not. And all the way down the list. And so if you wanted to express your opinion to some of those advertisers, or maybe even say, I really have a choice here. For example, Walmart continuously supports very family-friendly programs. Many of the channels we, by the way, just mentioned a minute ago are sponsored by them. On the other hand, Target tends to sponsor some of the worst. You could say, when I have a choice, I'd rather go to Walmart than Target, or, I'd rather buy from Hewlett-Packard rather than Microsoft, or whatever it might be. You have some real opportunities to express your moral convictions in the marketplace. So let me encourage you to do that. They're free to advertise where they want, but you know what? We're free to decide whether or not we want to watch those programs or go to those advertisers that have been producing and sponsoring programs that we disagree with. So wanted to give you all that information. It is available at our website, pointofview.net. It's also available, of course, at Parents Television Council. Parents TV is a good place to go. And so we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to spend some time talking about what is happening in the nation of Israel. Jimmy DeYoung will be joining us, and some incidents that took place when I was there just 2 weeks ago are the first topic of discussion. We'll talk about its prophetic significance, and once again, we'll open up the phones to give you a chance to join the conversation. To find everything we're talking about today, simply go to our website, pointofview.net. We'll be right back.
If you've been a Christian for any length of time, no doubt you've heard about Jesus feeding thousands with a few loaves of bread and a couple of fish. Jesus took something small and turned it into something big. Recently, someone here at Point of View made an interesting discovery. He did some math and figured out that according to the number of faithful listeners we have, if you and every other listener gave $5, it would help Kerby and the team bring you interviews and commentary for not 3 months, but 3 years. You heard me right. If every listener donates just $5, we'd pay what it costs to bring you this needed information for 3 years. And if you urge a friend to join you, you send 5, they send 5, well, you can imagine the impact. Click the Donate Now button at pointofview.net, pointofview.net, or send $5 to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Box 30, Dallas 75221. Send $5. Urge a friend to join you. Support Point of View. Point of View will continue after this.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
I'm going to spend some time talking about Israel. 2 weeks ago, about this time, I was in Jerusalem, and we had heard about the shooting of Rabbi Yehuda Glick. And, of course, he has survived that, but the shooting came from a radical Muslim, a part of Islamic Jihad. The next day, they closed down the Temple Mount. I thought it would be good to talk about some of the events that have been taking place in Jerusalem. There's prophetic significance, and can't think of a better person to bring to the microphone to talk about this than Dr. Jimmy DeYoung, who has resided in Jerusalem for at least a portion of each year for the last 23 years. Is a graduate of Tennessee Temple University, also holds a doctorate from Tennessee Temple University, and also received a PhD from Louisiana Baptist University. He's been very much involved in radio as well. At one time was the general manager of New York City's first Christian radio station, WNYM. Of course, he's been very involved with Word of Life Fellowship, and many of you perhaps also see him on Day of Discovery, and most likely even hear all the broadcasts that he does in Prophecy Today. So, Dr. Jimmy DeYoung, just a delight to have you on the program.
Hey, great to talk with you, Kerby, man. It was great, I'm sure, to be there in Jerusalem.
Well, it was amazing to be there, and you've been there many times. For me, it was my first trip, but I took some of our Point of View listeners. We hope to do that again in the future. But we were there right when all of this was happening, and I guess it would be helpful for our listeners who don't know all the players. That day, I'd run into Charlie Dyer, who's at Moody, and he was talking about Yehuda Glick, and we went to the Temple Institute a little bit later and knew some of that. But for our listeners, talk about who that is and why those tensions caused the closing of the Temple Mount for the first time in more than a decade.
Kerby, a number of years. Yehuda Glick, Rabbi Glick, a good friend of mine, and on my documentary, Ready to Rebuild Revisited, which is, I believe, probably the greatest documentary, not because I did it, but because of the people I had on it, the information we were able to give about the preparations to build the next temple. Now, the Temple Institute, which was directed by Rabbi Glick for a number of years, is doing all the preparation. They have produced and made or replicated all the implements that were in the temple, the table of showbread, the altar of incense, the menorah. They even know where the Ark of the Covenant is, and they can bring it out at any time they need to, they say. They've done the training for the 28,000 men who claim to be a part of the tribe of Levi, the family of the Kohanim, and they are the ones that they say will operate the next temple that will be on the Temple Mount in the city of Jerusalem. But just about 3 years ago now, Yehuda Glick decided to move beyond just making preparation for putting the temple on the Temple Mount. He wanted to alert people that the responsibility they now have is to go up onto the Temple Mount and there learn the location of the previous Jewish temple, understand what the activities were that would take place on the Temple Mount. And what was unique about Yehuda Glick, he not only did this for the Jewish people, it's a Jewish temple that they're going to erect, or at least they hope to erect there on the Temple Mount, but he encouraged the Muslims to go up there, and in particular the Christians to go up onto the Temple Mount. He believes that that next temple, according to what Isaiah the prophet says, will be a house of prayer for all nations around the world. Now, in essence and technically, Isaiah's prophecy is talking about the temple that will be built by Jesus Christ, Zechariah chapter 6 and verse 12, in the millennial kingdom. But the Jewish people, in anticipation of having a temple on the Temple Mount, believe that this will be that which will help and encourage the Messiah to come to the earth. So Yehuda Glick started this organization, and he almost on a daily basis would make his trip up to the Temple Mount. He would take a number of young people, especially. And actually, he was over there at the Menachem Begin Heritage Center. They were having a conference that night that he would be attacked by a Palestinian Islamic radical terrorist. He had been there braining some of the politicos, members of the Knesset. There at the conference center, Menachem Begin, that's a prestigious location. The Prime Minister often holds conferences there. The President of the country holds conferences there. He finished up what was going on, the conference that evening, encouraging everybody to get focused on the Temple Mount. Walked out to catch a bus to go home. A man walked up on him, asked him if he was Yehuda Glick. He said he was, and he shot him 4 times in the chest, which almost took his life. But the good report is, and we just found out today, that Yehuda Glick is not only recovering from those attacks, the bullets into his chest, the upper body part of his body, but he's now able to talk. He's off the respirator. He's encouraging the Jews. He's still mild-mannered. He's not attacking the Palestinian people, the Muslim people. He simply wants to continue his course that he's chosen for his life's ministry right now. Not a Christian. He's an Orthodox Jew. But he has a desire to focus on the Temple Mount, which, of course, is the apple of the Lord's eye, the Temple Mount. That's where Jesus in Zechariah chapter 1 and verse 16 said he will return to that location to build his temple, and then Zechariah 6:13 to rule and reign from there. So Yehuda Glick is doing well, but this had only a notching up of the tensions that have been taking place there on the Temple Mount. And, of course, we'll probably talk about that today as well.
Well, and let's just talk about the fact that you, even in the commentary we've posted here from Prophecy Today, talk about the fact that Zechariah predicted that the Temple Mount would be a center of controversy in the last days. And so I guess we shouldn't be surprised that with that tension, and by the way, I might just point out that it didn't take long for the military to go and track down this individual, Mutaz Hijazi, who was actually arrested for involvement in terrorist activities in the past. They tracked him down and actually killed him in a gunfight. So that individual did not live, and Yehuda Glick does live. But at the same time, when we come back from the break, I'd like to talk about some of the prophetic significance and importance of this most contested piece of real estate. And, of course, we also, Jimmy DeYoung, want to encourage people to go to your website because each day you give us sort of an update on what is happening there. So let's take a break. And as we go to our break, let's also encourage you to, first of all, go to our website, pointofview.net. If you click on the picture there of Jimmy DeYoung, you will see that will take you to jimmydeyoung.com. We also have a link to the turmoil on the Temple Mount. That will take you to some of the information that you might want from prophecytoday.com and news.prophecytoday.com. But again, we've got all the links for you so that you can find that. But if you'd like to ask a comment, make a comment or ask a question about what is happening in Israel right now, maybe the prophetic significance, you can't do any better than Dr. Jimmy DeYoung as our guest. So give us a call. That number is 1-800-351-1212, 1-800-351-1212, and we encourage you to find some of these articles on the Point of View website. Take those and maybe even pass them on to your friends, your neighbors, your coworkers. There's a share button on many of them so that you can put them on your Facebook page. That will start a conversation, and it would be a conversation that would, I think, result in being able to present the gospel. So let's take a break. We'll come back and continue our conversation with Dr. Jimmy DeYoung right after this.
The Point of View Commentary with Kerby Anderson.
Earlier this month, Brittany Maynard ended her life. She had become the public face of the euthanasia movement when she moved to Oregon so that she could end her life using Oregon's Death with Dignity Act. Before doing so, she engaged in a video campaign with the group Compassion and Choices. The debate over euthanasia and physician-assisted suicide has been taking place for decades, but her publicized choice about ending her life once again brings the debate into the public arena. Wesley J. Smith says that Compassion and Choices wants to exploit her assisted suicide as a crowbar to pry open California and other states to legalizing doctor-prescribed death. Already 3 countries and 5 states have some form of physician-assisted suicide. We can see the extreme in the Netherlands. In my book, Christian Ethics in Plain Language, I document the number of people who have been put to death without their consent. Doctors in that country are even allowed to decide if a child with a disability should live. What about the term death with dignity? In her column in the San Francisco Chronicle, Deborah Saunders asks a good question. If Maynard died with dignity, then does that mean that others who do not choose to choreograph their death lack dignity? She explains that the language that has been chosen by pro-euthanasia advocates, death with dignity, suggests that there is something undignified about holding on to life. What will be the impact on the disabled? Well, Johnny Erickson Tata believes that assisted suicide poses a significant danger to people with disabilities. She says, who is to say when multiple sclerosis or ALS is classified as terminal? People who receive a diagnosis of a chronic disabling condition often experience suicidal feelings, but later adapt very well. You know, death with dignity may sound compassionate, but the reality of the slogan should concern everyone. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
It's our privilege to have Dr. Jimmy DeYoung with us today, and if you'd like to join our conversation, love to get your thoughts about Israel being the epicenter of world affairs, the fact that there is an attempt to rebuild the temple on the Temple Mount, the conflict between Jews and Muslims in the old city of Jerusalem, certainly the prophetic significance. If you'd like to join us on any of those topics, 1-800-351-1212. Jimmy DeYoung, let me talk about that Temple Institute for just a minute. I did get a tour through that. They are really ready to go. I mean, they have all the pieces in place to actually begin an actual reconstitution of the kind of temple that existed during the days of Solomon, don't they?
It is so exciting, Kerby. The origins of this Temple Institute started in a yeshiva. Now, yeshiva is a place of learning for Jewish young men located in the Arab quarter of the old city of Jerusalem under Rabbi Nachman Kahana. He was the teacher of both Chaim Richman and Israel Ariel, who are the directors, the national directors and the international directors of the Temple Institute. He started teaching them. Rabbi Kahana was the brother, is actually the brother, of who was the rebel-rousing Jew Meir Kahana, who was shot down by an Egyptian terrorist in New York City. And I had, when I was in New York City, you mentioned that radio station, Rabbi Kahana was on the air there, and he told me one day when he came in to do his program that his number one desire was to build the temple on the Temple Mount. And I asked him why. He said, because when that temple is up there, the Messiah comes. Well, I leaned across the desk and said, the second time, Rabbi.
The second time.
Yeah, we had a great relationship. But when he was shot down, then going back to Israel, where we lived for the last 23 years, I made contact with Nachman Kahana, and he's taken that responsibility, that project over. And they have studied every detail from Maimonides, number one, who was a great Jewish sage back in the 12th century, because Maimonides wrote extensively about Herod's temple. Now, that's the temple they're preparing to build. The Bible calls for the temple that Jesus will build, the Messiah's temple, or the kingdom temple, that 1,000-year millennial reign, and different. It's described in 202 verses and passages of Scripture in Ezekiel 40 to 46. But the men at the Temple Institute, and what's so exciting to me, and the reason I report it, and I'm thrilled that you're reporting it, is that the Bible does call for a temple in the tribulation period, which will be desecrated by the Antichrist at the midway point. So with these men talking about building a temple that would be desecrated and not actually the one that Messiah Jesus will build, it is exciting to see, watching every preparation, every project, all the personalities involved. And it is a thrilling experience, and if people ever go to Israel, you better make sure that the leader of your group, make sure he takes you to the Temple Institute, because you do see these items that have been replicated to exact specific detail going in that temple, and it's so clear that this is tangible, solid evidence that that temple for the tribulation period, talked about in Daniel 9:27, Matthew 24:15, book of 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 and verse 4, and Revelation 11:1 and 2, is about to be built. That's a part of the tangible evidence of Bible prophecy about to be fulfilled.
It's just amazing. I've, of course, heard you and Randall Price and others talk about it, but it's something to just say, there it is. I mean, they take you in one room after another, and you see all the pieces, and it gets us a little closer to the rapture. I mean, I guess it's back to what some people have said. I don't know that I even want to buy green bananas, but it's pretty incredible that all of these pieces are coming together. But since you talked about Zechariah for just a minute, what is the prophetic significance? Because we talked about the fact that that temple is there. Zechariah also talks about it's a source of controversy, and it says that the Lord will be jealous for Jerusalem. So how do we as Christians think about some of the things that these Jewish leaders, like Yehuda Glick, want to do, and how does that fit into our timetable from a biblical point of view?
Well, as I just mentioned, those scripture verses in the tribulation period indicate that temple is going to be there. The one that Jesus will be building himself, Zechariah 6 and verse 12, comes after his second coming, which is following the 7-year period called the tribulation period, as Jesus Christ referred to it, and preceding that, of course, the rapture of the church. So if we can see the future, in fact, my wife said the other day that she was absolutely sure Thanksgiving was close at hand. I said, why? She said, because I see all the signs for Christmas, and indeed Thanksgiving becomes before Christmas. So, that's similar to what we're thinking about here. All those signs for the tribulation period, knowing the rapture comes before it, it has to be very close. That's how it plays into our theology, our eschatology, and the desire of these people willing. Yehuda Glick said, I'm going to go out and do the same thing I've been doing. Even though there may be a threat on my life, there are others who have said the exact same thing. They're not backing off of doing what they believe God has called them to do. They may be blinded, they may be misguided because they don't quite understand the exact portions of the Scripture, but they're playing into the prophetic scenario that God laid out through the ancient Jewish prophets, i.e. Zechariah. I love that phrase you mentioned. In Zechariah 1 and verse 14, he says, I'm jealous for Jerusalem. Yeah. But what I love about that, the Hebrew flavor to that word jealous is I'm aggressively possessive, because God has selected that piece of real estate to dwell among his people forever. It will be the center for eternity, not only during the kingdom period, but into eternity future, where Jesus Christ will rule and reign from a temple on that Temple Mount. That's what's exciting about all of this.
If you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. We'll give you a chance to ask a question or make a comment in just a minute. We've talked about, of course, the Jewish Christian perspective of the Temple Mount, but of course there's an impediment there, and it's the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque that is up there. And that makes it a little difficult for Yehuda Glick or for the Temple Institute to just stand up there and build a temple. So what about that issue?
That is a major issue. And I asked the guys, I know every one of the personalities involved, I asked them, well, what about that? And they say in the Lord's time, He's going to take care of that situation. Let me tell you, when Judy and I first arrived in Israel back in 1991, January, that was the time when Saddam Hussein sent 39 Scuds into Israel. And every one of us across the entire state of Israel at that time would put on our gas mask, go in our sealed room, and make sure we were protected from any possible Scud coming in with a chemical warhead on it. But not the Jews in the Jewish quarter of the old city. They never went into a sealed room. They never put on a gas mask. They ran to the Temple Mount, to the western wall. They started to pray, "Dear God, please let one of those Scuds hit the Dome of the Rock and take it out." You know what Scud stood for, of course, SCUD. Sure could use direction, because Saddam did not know where they were going. But that was their desire. They thought maybe that's the way God might take that Dome of the Rock off. I've got to tell you, there's been some suggestion, and I do document that on my video, Ready to Rebuild Revisited. I talked with not a archaeologist, but a physicist, Asher Kaufman, who said you could put the temple up there over in the area where the Dome of the Spirits is and leave the Dome of the Rock there. Well, I can tell you every one of the personalities preparing to build the temple today say, no way will we put a temple up there on that Temple Mount with that Dome of the Rock. Now, that's the Gold Dome building, and then of Al-Aqsa Mosque, the Pewter Dome building. They both have to come down, and the possibilities of that happening when an alignment of nations come against the Jewish people may well be some type of a missile or a Scud may take it out. God has a plan. We don't know exactly what it is, but it will happen.
Let's take a break, and if you can stay a little bit longer, we certainly want to spend a little more time talking about that video, Ready to Rebuild Revisited, and we'll take some phone calls. 1-800-351-1212. You can click on the picture there of Dr. Jimmy DeYoung, and then that will take you to a number of different websites that I think you will find very helpful. First of all, of course, jimmydeyoung.com is one that we have there. We also have the article that appeared on Turmoil in the Temple Mount, and that's in news.prophecytoday.com. And if you have trouble finding it, we have all the links necessary, so we certainly do encourage you to find some of those resources. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about some of the ways in which you can educate yourself about the temple and about prophecy. But if you'd like to join us, last half hour, we'll open up the phones. Open line, 1-800-351-1212. We've put lots of topics on the table. We'll keep him here a little bit longer for those of you that have any question about Israel or prophecy, and we'll move on to some other topics, and we certainly want to give you that opportunity. All of this available at our website, pointofview.net. Might also want to look at some of the videos that we've posted. We still have our uncensored video series up there. We have some of our action items, and encourage you to take the time to go to the website, pointofview.net. And as you go there, don't forget, of course, we're also dependent upon your financial gifts to keep this program going. And so I hope that you will take the time there to maybe click on the Donate Now button. Another button that I would certainly point you to is the Facebook page that is a place where we post additional information that supplements what we talk about here on radio. Let's take a break. We'll take some phone calls for Dr. Jimmy DeYoung right after this.
If you've been a Christian for any length of time, no doubt you've heard about Jesus feeding thousands with a few loaves of bread and a couple of fish. Jesus took something small and turned it into something big. Recently, someone here at Point of View made an interesting discovery. He did some math and figured out that according to the number of faithful listeners we have, if you and every other listener gave $5, it would help Kerby and the team bring you interviews and commentary for not 3 months, but 3 years. You heard me right. If every listener donates just $5, we'd pay what it costs to bring you this needed information for 3 years. And if you urge a friend to join you, you send 5, they send 5, well, you can imagine the impact. Click the Donate Now button at pointofview.net. Pointofview.net, or send $5 to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Box 30, Dallas 75221. Send $5. Urge a friend to join you. Support Point of View. Point of View will continue after this.
are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Final half hour, if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. We've kept Dr. Jimmy DeYoung along for just a little bit longer to answer some questions. And Jimmy, just before we take some of the phone calls here, Ready to Rebuild Revisited. I mean, 20 years ago, you certainly gave lots of inside information about the attempt to rebuild the temple. And now, of course, you have a revisited version of that, a DVD version that is available for any of our listeners. Talk about how people that are listening and would like to watch it can obtain it.
Well, thank you so very much, Kerby, for giving us that opportunity. By the way, it was very interesting. You said 20 years ago. And for 20 years, we've been documenting all this thing going on. And, of course, they have advanced closer to the time of being able to build that temple on the Temple Mount. But we realized about a year ago that we needed to revise it, update it, because we have so much more information. In fact, I have Nachman Kahana, the man I talked about, who started all the study among these Orthodox Jews on the subject. And I asked him, I said, do you think the temple's going to be rebuilt in your lifetime? He said, yes, I do believe it will be. I said, what about the priestly garments that have already been made? He said, mine was number one. I'm ready to put it on, go on to the Temple Mount, start my duties. He has been supposedly elected as the high priest for that temple in the tribulation period. I said to him, I said, what about the Sanhedrin? Have they been reformed? He said, well, yes, they have. I said, how do you know? He said, I'm the chairman. So I figured that was evidence of, in fact, that is the case. Now, some of these things we're talking about, all the previous things that ever happened, going into the places where they're studying the priestly duties. I go into the harp factory of Micah and Shoshana Harari to watch them as they have prepared these 4,000 harps which King David called for. I go to the location of the menorah, the seven-branch candelabra. I talked to three very prestigious rabbis or temple activists who went underneath the Dome of the Rock to the location of the Ark of the Covenant. This all on this documentary, and you can either call our toll-free number, 877-674-3298. That's 877-674-3298, and make your order from one of our staff, or you can go to our website, prophecytoday.com, prophecytoday, prophecytoday.com. Go to the Prophecy Bookstore, and you'll find it into the video section, and you can purchase it that way. We'll send it immediately to you. But this is something that will surely encourage you as we look at the scenario laid out in God's Word. And the next event, the most important event as far as Christians are concerned, the rapture of the church, when we're taken up to be with Him, it gives evidence that's about to happen.
Let's take some phone calls. We'll start in New Hampshire, WSEW. Bob, thank you for calling. You're on with Dr. Jimmy DeYoung.
Thanks, Kerby, very much. I love your program, and the $5 is going in the mail today. You know, I buy Christian books for $15.99, and in 2 hours I get more information, from your program than I do reading a whole book. So I can certainly justify $5 or more to keep you on the air. Just a sidelight. Jimmy, I wanted to ask a question. You mentioned the Jews acknowledging the tribulation. Are they aware? I mean, do they have a conscious awareness when they sign this peace treaty with this charismatic individual that will sweep them off their feet, that they're actually engaging in the Antichrist? I mean, how do they deal with that?
Well, listen, what's so interesting about what you just said is they don't sign a peace treaty. What you're referring to is Daniel 9:27, where it says, He, the Antichrist, shall confirm a peace treaty or a covenant with the Jewish people and their neighbors. Now, that word there in the text, Daniel 9:27, confirm, is the Hebrew word gabar, which does not mean sign. It means simply confirm. And the truth be known, there are 3 peace treaties already on the table. Camp David Accords from 1979 between Israel and Egypt, the Oslo Accords in 1993 between the Jewish people, the Israelis, and the Palestinians, and then the peace treaty between Jordan and Israel, which was signed in 1994, and I just happened to be able to be at that peace treaty signing as a journalist there in Jerusalem. And those three peace treaties actually have never been normalized. They are waiting to really come somehow to work. Both the Egyptian government is thinking about negating that peace treaty. The Jordanian government, King Abdullah, said the other day, we were far better off before we signed that peace treaty with Israel. But those two treaties on the table, waiting for that personality, that charismatic Antichrist, to come on the scene and walk up and say, hey, here are three peace treaties. You guys should already be at peace, but you're not. I can normalize them. I can make them work. I can confirm them. So we're even closer to the reality of the peace treaty between Israel and its neighbors than we'd have to be, because much negotiation would have to go on to go through that process again. They're waiting to be confirmed. The Antichrist will do it. He could be here at any moment.
Interesting. Let's take some more phone calls. We'll go to South Carolina. Dennis, WAGP. You're on with Dr. Jimmy DeYoung.
Hello. I'd like to ask Dr. DeYoung if he has heard about a book written by Bob Cornuke, I think his name is, about, he's saying that the Temple Mount is actually the remains of a Roman fortress, and he uses many scriptural proofs. The only one I can remember off the top of my head is the fact that Jesus said there would be no stone left on top of each other, and the Temple Mount is lots of stones standing on top of each other.
Well, I have not.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have not read the book. However, I know of the personality, and I know some of the other things he's made as statements of truth in the past. For example, that the Ark of the Covenant is in Ethiopia. The Bible will totally downgrade that statement. 2 Chronicles chapter 35 and verse 3. King Josiah told him to put it underneath the Temple Mount at that time, which would be underneath the Dome of the Rock. He's also talked about the location of Mount Sinai, and if you study the scriptures, no way it could be in Saudi Arabia. In fact, he even lied to the Saudi Arabian government so he could get on the site to what he claims as Mount Sinai, and it had to be the northern route that the Jewish people took. But having made that statement, every archaeologist that I know, and I know every major archaeologist in Jerusalem, would indicate that Temple Mount, as we know it, where the Dome of the Rock is absolutely the location of the previous two temples and the place for the third temple to be put in. Of course, Jesus Christ can tell you exactly where it is. It's over the spot where the Garden of Eden was located. And, of course, you talk to any of those rabbis who are associated with the Temple Institute, they'll tell you that Gold Dome building has a cover for the foundation stone, which both the Muslims and the Jews, the Jewish scholarship, say is the location. Even Rabbi Yehuda Glick on my DVD, Ready to Rebuild, makes the exact same statement. That's the original site of the Garden of Eden. That's where the temple's going to be built. I don't care what anybody else says.
And what you said before is that there's really no way that you could come up with, because I know some people have talked about the temple could be built sort of between where the Al-Aqsa Mosque is and the Dome of the Rock, but you don't see any Jewish leaders right now seeing that as a good idea. I can't imagine Muslims would ever go for that as well.
Of course the Muslims would not go for it. They'll put 1.5 billion people up there to try to wipe out the Jews if they endeavor to try to do that. But between the Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque is that wash basin. That is one theory for some people, yes, where they say the temple went. The other is the Dome of the Spirits was just northwest of where the Gold Dome building is, and that is another location where Asher Kaufman said that would be the place. And he said it because when they sacrificed the animals there on the altar outside of the temple, which if it was over the Dome of the Spirits, the blood would flow out the eastern gate. The problem with that eastern gate we see today is not the original. That was built by Suleiman the Magnificent in the 16th century. Original eastern gate is south and lower, lining up with the location of the Dome of the Rock. And archaeologists would have to say that is the spot.
Yes. Well, again, if people get a copy of your Ready to Rebuild Revisited, you give them a little better understanding of what the Dome of the Rock looks like and what the Temple Mount looks like?
I actually go into the Dome of the Rock. I show where the Holy of Holies was in the original first two temples, and where the Ark of the Covenant was located, and I talked with Asher Kaufman, and I lay this all out, walking all over the Temple Mount. So we make it very, very visible to them, Kerby, to be able to see exactly what you and I are talking about right now.
Jimmy DeYoung with us, and if I can keep you a little longer, at least one more phone call that we might get to, and if you would like to join us, we'll try to get in another call if we can, 1-800-351-1212. If you'd like to know a little bit more about Jimmy DeYoung, just click on his picture there. We have links to the various websites, of course, his own website, jimmydeyoung.com, and of course, we just mentioned a minute ago, the website, prophecytoday.com, and you can go to that bookstore and find out a little bit more about this DVD we were talking about. We'll come back and take some more phone calls right after these important messages. Stay tuned. We'll be back right after this.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Pleased to have Dr. Jimmy Young with us for just a few more minutes. If you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. Garla in California, listening on KYCC. You're on with Dr. Jimmy DeYoung.
Thank you, gentlemen, for taking my call. I'll be as brief as possible. I need an understanding of Matthew 24, verse 9. It says, "Then they will deliver you to tribulation and will kill you, and you will be hated by all nations because of my name." Now, to me, when I read that, I'm thinking that's Israel. But these were Christian Jews following Jesus that were asking about the timeline of his kingdom coming to the earth. So is it also applicable to Christians of today? And I will leave you, and you can answer.
The answer is that when you're reading from Matthew chapter 24, there are no Christians on the scene at that time. Christians do not come into existence till Acts chapter 2, when the church was established on the day of Pentecost there in the city of Jerusalem, located in the original city of Jerusalem, the city of David. So it's Jewish believers that are listening to Jesus as he starts his Olivet Discourse. When you get down to verse 3, they ask Jesus, after he had stepped from the Temple Mount, and he made the unbelievable statement to these Jewish believers with him, the disciples in particular. He said, there's not going to be a stone upon this stone. And I said it was an opulent building. It was 15 stories high, covered with 24-karat pure gold. Rabbi said if you'd never seen Herod's temple, you'd never seen a beautiful building. But they stepped off the Temple Mount, going over to the Mount of Olives, where Jesus would respond to their questions in the Olivet Discourse. And he said that this will happen. They'll be completely torn down. And Peter and John, I'm sure, must have said between themselves, what's he talking about?
Yes.
When they get to the Mount of Olives and they ask him, when is that going to happen? When is it that the the Jewish people come into that tribulation? Well, Matthew 24 never deals with the rapture of the church. It's dealing with the Jewish people and his second coming. He says in chapter 24, verse 29, immediately after the tribulation, he lays out. And one of the things that we've been focused on is that he responds to the prophecy by Daniel, chapter 24, verse 15, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel, flee, get out of town. And that's what he's doing, giving them information about when the temple would be destroyed, number one, number two, his second coming, and the third question, the end of time. So don't put Christians there in Matthew 24. Are you going to be totally discombobulated with prophecy?
If people wanted to know a little bit more about Prophecy Today and about your organization, we've already, of course, mentioned Ready to Rebuild Revisited. Just before I let you go, let's talk about how people can get your broadcast. They can see what you are posting on a regular basis and really follow some of the events taking place in Israel. So if you can, give us some direction on where to find all that information.
Kerby, you're so kind. You can go to my website, prophecytoday.com. There on our website, on the home page, every single day I get up and list the 10 leading news stories happening from somewhere in this world that may have a relationship or a connection to the end-time scenario found in God's Word. And then you can double-click on that, and on my home page we have our 5-minute broadcast, which is broadcast across the United States, Prophecy Today Daily. And it takes one of those issues and those 10 leading news stories and talks about it in the way that we need to understand what really it is saying to each and every one of us as the prophetic scenario lays it out. For example, I talk about a U.S. congressman today talking about the second Holocaust with the slaughter of Jewish people. And that comes from what's going on in Iran and among the Palestinians. And then I talk in my 15-minute daily broadcast, which is Prophecy Today Intelligent Briefing. It's on the home page as well. Today, for example, I'm talking with Itamar Marcus, heads up Palestinian Media Watch, and it reports to the world and to the legislators, the people in the United States Congress, people in the European Union, what the Palestinian media is actually saying to their people, not to us, but to their people. Now, those are a couple of the features. The programs I did on Day of Discovery, we have them on our home page that you can go to and watch those videos. I'm now doing just about half of the programs with John Ankerberg, maybe not quite that much, but we're doing a lot with him. And then we can go to our Q&A section. I have a prophecy Q&A, all the questions that you may have wanted to call but couldn't get through to have me try to respond to. We have that on our website. We have our prophecy bookstore, all of the items that we have produced, both DVDs, and those are documentaries. And then we have CD, 5-hour audio series. We have my books. Those are all available on my website. And you could just go to the website, prophecytoday.com. That'll be a great way to understand what we're doing, how we're simply, Kerby, trying to help the body of Christ recognize the times we're living in, and be prepared for that next event, the rapture of the church.
Well, thank you for giving us such good information, and we certainly do encourage people to pray for you. Pray for Yehuda Glick and some of the things that we've talked about today. And Dr. Jimmy DeYoung, thanks for joining us. We'll do it again.
Looking forward to it. Keep looking up. Jesus is coming. It could be today.
Could be today. Just before I go, let's talk about some of the resources that we have put on the table so that you can join with us. The first hour today, of course, we talked with Tim Winter, and we gave you some information about what you might want to do to contact some of those advertisers. And again, you can go to their website because that will give you the kind of the naughty and nice list. He doesn't call it that, but I did. It's parentstv.org, and it has the best and worst advertisers of 2014, so that's some great resources for you to follow, and that is on the website. We, of course, have the links necessary for you to find out a little bit more about Jimmy DeYoung, and we certainly do encourage you to take the time to find those websites because, again, when you go to prophecytoday.com, you might want to find some of the radio broadcasts, some of the feeds, and of course he has the Prophecy Bookstore, which is where you can find some of the resources we talked about, one of which, of course, was Ready to Rebuild Revisited. So some great resources that we've talked about today, and I hope that you'll take the time to visit the website pointofview.net. Tomorrow we're going to spend a little bit of time talking first about marriage and family. This is a time when we're maybe out of the news cycle for a day, and we have a chance to talk with Gary Thomas about a lifelong love. And then in the second hour today, we'll bring back our good friend Johnny Moore. We've talked about him, about some of his previous books. The newest one, What Am I Supposed to Do with My Life? And so I think you will benefit from some of those. And of course, Friday will be our weekend edition. Benedexter was in Jerusalem the same time I was. 2 different tours. Didn't even know we were going to be there at the same time. And of course, we saw what indeed took place when there was the shooting of Rabbi Yehuda Glick and the closing down of the Temple Mount for the first time in more than a decade, and some of the tensions there. So we will certainly be talking about some of those issues and following up on some of the stories coming down as a result of now being able to say with some certainty how many particular members of Congress have been elected. There have been a few that have been in question. And of course, we've also recognized now that it is likely that the Republicans will control about 54% or more of the seats in the Senate, 56% of the seats in the House. But we also want to talk a little bit about the fact that it now looks like the Republicans will control about 2/3 of the state legislative chambers, also control at least 31 different governorships. So the Republican Party has made some significant gains since the election that we talked about last week, and we want to talk about what that might mean, both in terms of state bills and legislature, but also, of course, at the federal level. And so we'll be talking about lots of issues on our Friday program, Weekend Edition, and we encourage you to join us every single day. If you'd like to hear this broadcast again, you can also go to our website, pointofview.net, and download a podcast, maybe send it on to some others that might be interested about what's been happening in Israel. So that's all we have for today. I want to thank Andrew and Catherine and Chris for the help behind the scenes. Have a great day, and we will see you back here tomorrow.
If you've been a Christian for any length of time, no doubt you've heard about Jesus feeding thousands with a few loaves of bread and a couple of fish. Jesus took something small and turned it into something big. Recently, someone here at Point of View made an interesting discovery. He did some math and figured out that according to the number of faithful listeners we have, if you and every other listener gave $5, it would help Kerby and the team bring you interviews and commentary for not 3 months, but 3 years. You heard me right. If every listener donates just $5, we'd pay what it costs to bring you this needed information for 3 years. And if you urge a friend to join you, you send 5, they send 5, well, you can imagine the impact. Click the Donate Now button at pointofview.net. Pointofview.net, or send $5 to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Box 30, Dallas 75221. Send $5. Urge a friend to join you. Support Point of View. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.
Call my husband. It's costing.
Jewish temple, understand what the
Donate now.
I'm looking at what are the advertised